A cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home.
Join us as we explore what Gene Hackman's best friend Dustin Hoffman meant when he said, "He's not who you think he is." Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman together, even though most people would never consider such a thing. Hollywood has always been a place of legends, but few actors have left a mark as deep as Gene Hackman's, even in his final years. His abrupt and unexplained death shocked the world, leaving behind questions, secrets, and a chilling revelation from his closest friend. Sincere friendships are uncommon in Hollywood, which is a brutal place. Even the strongest bonds are frequently destroyed by fame, competition, and the never-ending pursuit of success. But some friendships are formed in the midst of hardship, in small, cold apartments with little money for food, on rooftops where dreams are discussed into the night, and in lengthy conversations full of laughter, doubt, and survival. One such friendship was between Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman, two very different actors who began their journey together and, in spite of everything, remained connected by the past they shared. The friendship started in 1956 at Pasadena Playhouse, a renowned acting school in California. Dustin Hoffman was a young man who had experimented with medicine and music, but had never felt truly passionate about anything until he entered his first acting class. This was the first time in his life that he could devote himself fully to anything, and it changed everything. Later in his career, he frequently joked that he looked like a rat on screen, but he had something that made him stand out: an intense energy and an undeniable talent. When Gene Hackman first saw Dustin, he was instantly struck by how different he was. Gene Hackman, on the other hand, was a completely different kind of man at 27 who had already served in the Marines and had a tough, no-nonsense demeanor. Unlike Dustin, he did not hesitate in his career choice. He knew he wanted to be an actor, even though few believed in him. He was older than most of the other students and had a serious, determined attitude. Dustin stood in the center of the room, dressed in similar corduroy slacks and a corduroy vest with no shirt underneath. Their time at Pasadena Playhouse was brief, particularly for Gene, as the school had a strict grading system that ranked students in categories like movement, voice projection, gestures, interpretation, and attitude. Gene later stated that he initially thought Dustin was a strange little guy, but there was something about him that intrigued him despite their differences. When Gene failed to live up to these expectations, he was expelled after only 3 months. Instead of giving up, he made the brave decision to pack his bags and move to New York to pursue acting on his own. 2 years later, Dustin followed him, but when he got there, he had only $50 in his pocket and had no idea what to do next. The city overwhelmed him with its size and noise, and Pace lost it. Struggling, he found Gene, who allowed him to sleep on the floor of his tiny kitchen. Originally intended to be a few nights, but ended up lasting 3 weeks before Gene and his wife Faye realized they could not continue to host him indefinitely and decided it was time to push him towards independence. The two of them ended up in a 3-bedroom, 6th-floor walk-up apartment on 109th Street and Broadway, after Gene took Dustin out to look for apartments. It wasn't just a house, it was more like a hostel for aspiring actors and opera singers, trying to make ends meet in New York. The apartment was anything but easy. None of them had steady jobs, so they took on any job they could find to make ends meet. Dustin, Robert, and Gene were employed by the Yellow Pages as typists, furniture, worked in pharmacies, and even as a doorman. At one point, Gene got a job carrying priceless artwork, but his negligence almost led to a catastrophe when he unintentionally pierced a Picasso lithograph with a broomstick. The owner watched in horror as the priceless artwork was destroyed. Despite the daily hardships, there was unquestionably joy during those years. On many nights, they climbed onto their building's rooftop and played drums with Dustin on the bongos and Gene on the congas. Dustin later recalled how they were obsessed with meeting women and how acting schools were full of models. Occasionally, a woman would approach and suggest that they rehearse a love scene, and he and his friends would eagerly agree. However, the most bizarre moments frequently came from Robert Dustin, who used to tell stories about how, after a successful night with a woman, he would wake up the next morning and take a shower with her, only for Robert to suddenly walk in completely naked. Intro, they were no longer 3 unknown actors trying to make it. Instead, they were now famous people with busy schedules and different paths. They hardly ever saw one another, and their late-night rooftop drum sessions turned into memories rather than a routine. In 2003, almost 50 years after they first met, Dustin and eventually collaborated on Runaway Jewelry. Gene revealed something that many actors secretly worry about. After finishing a film, he wondered if he would ever get hired again. Dustin was all too familiar with the emotion, but no matter how much time goes by, the memories of their difficult times together, playing music on rooftops, sleeping on kitchen floors, and sharing the same dream, will always be connected to Gene Hackman's mysterious passing. The internet was inundated with startling news just when everyone believed that these pals, notably Dustin and Gene, would finally enjoy themselves more when they retired. One of Hollywood's greatest legends has passed away. It was supposed to be just another peaceful morning in the vast landscapes of New Mexico, where Gene had spent his later years away from the flashing lights of Hollywood. A maintenance worker arrived at his property for a routine check, expecting nothing unusual. Gene Hackman, the man whose voice and presence had shaped some of the most unforgettable moments in cinema, had been found dead in his Santa Fe home. But the tragedy didn't end there. His wife, Betsy Arawakawa, had also been found dead. The house was always quiet as it stood motionless in the warm desert sun, but something felt off. There was no sound, no movement, and when the worker knocked on the door, there was no answer. He hesitated, then knocked again, louder this time, but nothing worried him. He called security, and soon a guard came to assist, and they walked around the house looking. Everything appeared normal through the windows until the guard's eyes widened. In horror, and he stopped abruptly. Inside, motionless figures lay on the floor, and the guard fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed 911. A moment later, sirens pierced the silence, and deputies from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office arrived. Their flashing lights illuminated the quiet property, adding to the mystery. The body was in the bathroom, close to a small heater and an open medicine bottle. One of their dogs was curled up dead close to foul play, as though it had just fallen asleep. But oddly, 2 other dogs were still alive. One was pacing uneasily, while the other was watching over Betsy's still body. Later, they discovered Gene in a room fed shoes. A set of spectacles and a cane were resting next to him as if he had dropped them right before passing out. The room was unaltered. Nothing seemed out of place. It seemed as though time had stopped for him, just as it had for Betsy and their dog. No broken glass, no overturned furniture, no blood. If you're curious about Dustin's reaction to the death of his best friend, stay with us a little while longer because we'll discuss some other odd police discoveries that further complicated the case first. There was no indication of forced entry, but it was an unsettling scene that left investigators looking for answers in Gene Hackman's house. In Santa Fe, away from Hollywood and the never-ending spotlight, Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arawakawa, had led a peaceful and secluded life. Their sudden and unexplained deaths shocked not only their friends and neighbors, but the entire film industry as well. No one, especially not Dustin Hoffman, could have predicted such a tragic and mysterious ending. Those who knew them described their days as peaceful, full of simple routine means and a love for solitude. There had never been any signs of trouble or reason to believe anything was wrong. Carbon monoxide. Poisoning was the first theory that detectives looked at since it seemed like the most plausible explanation. An invisible, lethal gas leaking into the house and silently killing everyone. The symptoms matched, and even one of their dogs had passed away, which confirmed the assumption. Specialists from the gas company and the fire department raced to the scene, searching every aspect of the house for signs of the poison, but their tests turned up nothing. No leak, no broken heater, nothing in the air that might have been the silent murderer. Detectives were left reeling when the explanation fell apart, and while they looked for a different reason, they discovered something equally unsettling. There were several prescription drugs in the house, some of which were neatly stored in cabinets. Blood pressure medications were among the bottles that were strewn all over counters, some of which were even open. Thyroid problems and overall pain alleviation. Every bottle was meticulously recorded by investigators, who noted that some had hardly been touched. Others were only half drained, which led to further inquiries about whether it was a fatal combination of drugs, an unintentional overdose, or something else entirely. Then came the revelation that completely altered everything. Gene Hackman's pacemaker, a gadget that not only controlled his heart, but also captured important information, was taken out for analysis. Experts retrieved the data, and what they discovered chilled the inquiry. The last known heartbeat of Gene Hackman was recorded on February 17th, 9 days before his body was found. revelation changed the course of events, indicating that Gene had been dead for more than a week while the house remained undisturbed. However, what was even more unsettling was the question of whether Betsy died at the same time, or if she had been living alone in that house for days, slowly fading away, with no one to assist Dustin Hoffman with his best friend. Until all the tests are completed, some time will pass before we know the answers to the majority of these questions. But while investigators look for the truth, tributes have poured in from all over the world. Among the others, Dustin Hoffman. Hackman's closest friend for over 60 years finally broke his silence. And when he did, he shocked everyone. "It's time to tell everything," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "He's not who you think he is." Maybe he led a quiet and withdrawn life and kept secrets, but Gene Hackman was full of life, much more than anyone I know. Dustin spoke not just of Gene's greatness as an actor, but of the passion that made him. Unforgettable, he described him as a man of restless energy, someone who never did anything halfway, whether he was perfecting a role discussing history or obsessing over a book he had just read. Gene threw himself into everything. With the same intensity, he was fascinated by the smallest details, able to recall obscure facts about architecture war strategy or old Hollywood scandals beyond the screen. He had a sharp, often biting sense of humor, the kind that could catch people off guard. He loved the thrill of competition, whether it was a game of chess, a round of poker, or even a simple bet on how long a director would take to set up a shot. He had a deep love for classic cars, restoring them with the same precision he brought to his performances. That was who he was, never just an actor, but a man who lived life with a quiet but undeniable fire. If you could ask Dustin Hoffman one thing about Gene Hackman, what would it be? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more.